I'm Phil Devon. I'm manager of the transport team at Northern Beaches Council. I'd like to thank our guest panellists today. I've got Dan Wigmore from the Department of Climate Change, Environment, I've stuffed that up, no, Energy, Environment and Water. I've also got Darren from Ausgrid. I've got Michael from the Australian EV Association. I've got Toby Hagan on the end, motoring journalist extraordinaire, and I've got Peter from Bicycle New South Wales. I'd like to kick off the session by asking each of the panellists a one-liner that tells everyone what your organisation's expertise is in the transport field. So, start with Dan.
Great, thanks for that. So I work for New South Wales Government in the Net Zero transport space, and essentially we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to make a decision to purchase an electric vehicle.
Darren Fitzpatrick. I'm the Senior Development Manager for Ausgrid. I work in the electric vehicle charging infrastructure team. Ausgrid's expertise is owning and operating a distribution network. So we're looking to get the electrons from the generators into your cars and bikes.
So Michael Day, I'm National Treasurer of the Electric Vehicle Association. We're builders of electric vehicles, owners of electric vehicles, and some businesses in and around electric vehicles. And we lobby for the rights for all the wants, needs, requirements of electric vehicle owners.
And Toby Hagan, so I'm a motoring rider, basically ride about all cars, not just EVs, but take a pretty big interest in electric vehicles. It's the coolest part of the industry at the moment. Basically, interview a bunch of people and drive a lot of cars, so yeah.
Like that. I'm Peter from Bicycle New South Wales, and we're trying to get people riding more bikes more often, and so we advocate for better bicycle infrastructure across New South Wales, working with state and local and a little bit federal government, and offer membership solutions and discounts and promotions and insurance for bike riders across the state.
Cool, thank you. I've got a question here for Dan to start with. Can you explain what the role of New South Wales Government is, the programs and initiatives it's offering, and an EV update in general?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. As you can see on that slide, that was a statement from Minister Keane in 2021, which is the aim is to drive sales of electric vehicles up to 50% by 2030. That's a significant number. We're currently sitting on around 10% in this state in terms of electric vehicles. So there's a little way to go, but I don't know about you, I quite like a challenge. But the aim really is for us to be putting in the ground the charging infrastructure that the state is going to need today, put it in the ground today or plan for it today so that it's ready for tomorrow. There's a huge amount of investment going on across a variety of programs. I think I've got another slide up which shows a bit more about uptake. So that slide there was our friends at the Electric Vehicle Council put together, which shows on the right side there the quantity of EVs in Australia and New South Wales. Essentially, it's doubled pretty much for the last few years. And the predictions are that increase is set to continue. And there's a little graph there, it's harder to see, but just shows the EV uptake in Northern Beaches over the last 14, 15 months. And that kind of steep curve of increase is pretty accurate for a lot of suburbs, especially metro and Sydney and Greater Sydney suburbs. So we see that about doubling. It's pretty consistent across a lot of councils, a lot of council areas. But the next slide will show you a bunch of programs that we're working on. So a big part of what we do is working with fleets, both within New South Wales government fleets and also councils and businesses. We have conversations with them about putting electric vehicles in, and we have incentives to help people make that decision. But we also have a lot of education programs that we do as well, so fleet managers can understand what's required to electrify their fleets. Then we're looking at putting fast chargers in. So fast chargers are those big units, DC units, usually on highways or just off highways. Big program there where we're putting fast chargers or co-funding fast chargers every 100 k's on major Sydney highways and every 5 k's on Sydney commuter corridors. And then a program that's very popular, which is around destination chargers. We've got one in our stand just there, so you can see an example of what they look like. Those are things that you'll find at tourism destinations, hotels, motels, wineries, etc. You plug in and whilst you're doing something else, so you're at a destination. I was down in Wagga last week. The motel we stayed in had a charger, plugged in overnight, and I'm ready to go in the next morning. It's as simple as that. And then a program where we are, which one's that one? Curbside charging. That was just announced recently, and Northern Beaches was a recipient of that grant as well. So that's essentially putting curbside chargers in the ground. And then programs around retrofitting strata buildings to make sure that people that don't have access to off-street parking can charge as well. So a range of programs, all designed to make people feel comfortable that if they made their own personal decision or their business decision to move towards EVs, that there's going to be a charging infrastructure there that's going to support them. If you want to learn any more about any of those programs or how they might apply to you, please come and see our stand over there. We'll happily chat you through.
Thanks for that, Dan. Darren, next question for you. We always hear a lot about the electricity network and the grid, not being capable of taking all the EVs, that sort of thing. Can you give us an update on what Ausgrid's doing to meet that demand, and also how the other programs Ausgrid are running fit in with what council's doing and the industry's doing as a whole?
Yeah, definitely, Phil. Thanks a lot for the question. We do hear a lot about the ability of the grid to meet the increased demand of electric vehicles, wanting the electrons from generators to come through and fill the new tanks of the cars. So the graph that we have on board there at the moment is it's the system demand across New South Wales over the last, I think it's 7 years. We can see the amount of demand during the middle of the day is dropping rapidly, and that's got a lot to do with the amount of solar generation that's happening on rooftops around our state. But we're also seeing that the peaks in the morning and in the evening are staying about the same. So that is being colloquially termed a duck curve at the moment. My colleague Bryn spoke a bit about it this morning. And it is probably one of the biggest challenges that grids around New South Wales and Australia have. So what we're trying to do is make sure that EVs can fit into this challenge we have, and they're actually going to potentially, if it's rolled out correctly, offset a lot of the problems that excessive solar is causing during the day. So first off, the EVs are going to create quite a large demand. Our expectations is that a household will increase its demand by about 50 to 100% with a new electric vehicle replacing a combustion engine. And the second part of it is that electric vehicles are very variable load. It doesn't have to be used at a certain part of the day or charged at a certain part of the day. It's not like an oven. You can't ask people to cook their dinner during the middle of the day and have it ready for the evening. But with an electric vehicle, we can definitely make sure or encourage people to charge at the times that are right, both for them and for the grid. So if we can communicate the problem and also communicate potential solutions, we see electric vehicles having a really important impact on our grid. So just going on from that as well, there are some future technologies or technologies that look like they're going to become available in the near future that are going to assist with that as well. Smart charging is something that is in its infancy at the moment. A lot of people might have seen, if they have electric vehicles, you can buy a solar smart home charger, and what that does, it monitors the export of your solar out into the grid, and it will match the charging of your car to what that solar export is. So it means that you're using all your solar energy to charge your car during the day. So that's an example of smart charging. It will develop over time. It will be able to take signals from the EV driver. It'll be able to take signals from a retailer. It'll be able to take signals from a charge point operator, and it will be able to take signals from a grid operator as well. And it'll take all those data points and it will create a charge profile that best suits all of those variables to create the best charging for the grid, but also the cheapest price for the EV owner. The other thing that we've got in the near or on the horizon is vehicle to grid. It is a very popular topic at the moment. We think it's going to have a huge impact on the grid as well. So for every million cars that have vehicle to grid that are connected, it's 7 gigawatts of dispatchable power that's available. Now, to put that in context, there's only 6 gigawatts of battery storage in the national electricity market at the moment. So it has a huge potential to impact on our duck curve there. Vehicle to grid can also provide financial benefit for EV owners as well. Similar to virtual power plants at the moment with home batteries, we think that vehicle to grid will have the same potential for EV owners. So that's our main goal at Ausgrid. We want to maintain a reliable and resilient network with EVs demand coming on board. The other part at Ausgrid that we're very focused on at the moment is curbside charging. 30% of homes in our network don't have access to off-street parking, so it's extremely important to create a fair and ubiquitous charging platform for those people to be able to have the same benefits as people with off-street parking. So we're looking at that in two areas at the moment. The first one is we're making the assets that we already own available as locations for curbside charging points. On the screen there at the moment, we've partnered with a company called Jolt. They are retrofitting, or they retrofit a grill over the top of our kiosk distribution substation. We think it's great because it doesn't add extra street furniture onto the footpath, and I think it looks better. I think the grill looks a lot better than the green box, but there has been feedback that people aren't sort of so keen on the advertising. But there are benefits for it as well. So Joel has been able to provide EV drivers with 7 kilowatt of free charging every day, and that gets taken up a lot. So they've provided a lot of kilowatt hours for EV drivers with their business model for free. So that's one example of it. The other example, which is on the next slide here, is we've partnered with companies EVX and IntelliHub. They're rolling out curbside chargers that are mounted on our power poles. So as part of the New South Wales grant funding that Dan was talking about earlier, we've got another potentially up to 200 sites that are going to have more EV chargers that are mounted on poles in the future. So we're trying to utilise our assets as best we can to give charging opportunities for EV drivers. The last thing Ausgrid is advocating for is we think there's an opportunity for Ausgrid to be an EV charger provider. We have ambitious targets of 11,000 pole-mounted EV chargers that are owned and operated by Ausgrid in the future. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles to get over before then. It is definitely an advocacy position that we're taking on that at the moment, and we're in discussions with New South Wales Government and the Australian Energy Regulator on it. So yeah, in 2 points, it's just that we're making sure that the grid is resilient and reliable, and that we're enabling curbside charging as much as we possibly can.
No worries. Thanks, Darren. Now, trying to keep Michael to sort of 10 minutes minimum on this is going to be interesting. Living with an EV, and your experience with electric vehicles, given your wealth of knowledge.
So you might as well go to the next slide. That's a little bit about AEVO, which we talked about before. So the next slide, that's my fleet of electric vehicles. So right now I've got, my wife's up there, we've got 3 electric vehicles right now. So I'm a builder of electric vehicles, so that was where I started. And then I've got the scooters and more recently the Tesla, which is my daily driver. Didn't double my bill. I've been driving electric vehicles for about 15 years and it added about $100 to my bill, my power bill. Largely because I suck up the solar. Might as well go to the next slide because it sort of shows you the different types of chargers. There's home chargers, destination chargers and fast chargers. I've got a really slow home charger. I've got a reasonably fast destination charger for my home. They're smart. So the reason that my bill is so small, given the electric vehicles that I have, is that I suck up all the solar that I can and put it into my transport. Like I say, it costs me about $100 a year to run 3 electric vehicles. Where I started with electric vehicles, next slide please, is I used it's the smart one. So I've got 2 parts to my charging. I've got the dumb one on the right, which just really plugs in and it runs off at 10 or 15 ampere. I used that for quite a while and did dumb charging, just whenever I needed to. If I've got a slow week, it might be 40 Ks. If I've got a busy week, it's maybe 140 Ks that I need to charge my car. And I was very deliberate about my charging. I would plug it in, and maybe an hour, might be 2 hours, something along those lines. Now, I'm a bit smarter with it. I just get home, plug it in. It runs off the solar system. So from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. it's charging. Means I suck up the solar. The 7 cents feed-in tariff that I forego goes into my electric vehicle. So instead of costing 38 cents that I'd buy off the grid, I effectively forego 7 cents, go straight into my car, and I'm not deliberate about it. I just use it like my mobile phone, plug it in, 10 till 12 charges. The only time that there's a downside to that is when my kids take the car during the week, when they take the Tesla, and I need to do a fast charge. I need to do a quick top up, come out to Narrabeen, on the Friday night to make sure that I'm ready for the weekend, and that's not necessarily a fast charge. It's just faster than running off the solar system. So those are the 2 types of charging that I do, and like I say, it hasn't massively increased my bill. It's massively decreased my fuel bill. I used to have an old diesel that would take $2,000 per year to run. Now it costs me about $100 a year to run because I've got smart charging and I'm a little bit more, less deliberate, so to speak, but more routine in the way that I charge my electric vehicle. What's the next slide? Out-of-home charging. One thing that we're advocating right now as the Australian electric vehicle is the different layers of charging that we need. There's home charging. If you've got home charging, then electric vehicle is a no-brainer. If you've got home charging, you've got solar, then it's seriously, there's the benefits for it. What we need after that is destination charging, so you can come to Narrabeen, so you can go to your hotel, you can go to different attractions and charge there, always really useful. And then we need fast charging out on the highways and byways so that we can go places. Where we go Orange a couple of weeks ago, or Canberra not that long ago. So longer distances when you need the fast chargers. But we need the multiple layers. You need it at home, you need it in destination so we can infill, and you need it in fast chargers in and about. And so because I've got the Tesla, I use Tesla charging mostly. It's available, right place, right time. A little bit expensive, but I hardly ever use it. I think I've used fast charging about 5 times. And that's because I went to Canberra. And there's apps. You can see that's just one of the better charge providers, charge applications, PlugShare, that shows you where the chargers are. So they know so you know where to go, and you can plan your route. And if you've got a smart car, like the Hyundais or like the Teslas, it'll tell you where to go and where you need to stop. So that's a little bit about how I use my electric vehicle.
No worries. Thanks for that. Toby, you've had a recent trip through the centre of Australia driving a couple of EVs. Can you give us an insight into buying an EV, but then also a little bit about your remote area experience? Yeah,
I'll start with the remote area. So yeah, we drove from Darwin to Sydney, but we took the hard way. So we went basically through as outbacky as we could go. So up through Mount Isa and Birdsville, Batuta, all these pretty remote places, which I wanted to obviously see what it was like. And fortunately, Michael's helped out with a lot of the charging outlets out there. So yeah, there's a lot of places that have 3-phase power that you can tap into and charge up. So it took a lot of planning. It took heaps of planning to get that trip up and going, but it was remarkably easy to do it. And I've had this discussion with some of the car companies. Toyota, one of the Toyota execs saying to me, you know, where are you going to charge these things? And I said, mate, I've just done it. Everyone's got electricity, and that's what it ultimately comes down to, right? The entire country has electricity. Worst case scenario is you stay there for quite a while charging up off a standard power point. It's going to take a while for sure, but you can at least get it done. Whereas, you know, hydrogen at the moment, it's a bit of a challenge. There's none of that out there, so it makes it pretty tricky. So in terms of buying EVs, I guess in the last, the last month or two in particular, we've seen some amazing discounts kicking in across the EV market. It's not just the EV market, it's the entire car market at the moment is copping, I guess, a bit of a readjustment post-COVID. The car industry basically took the shortage of supply throughout COVID as an opportunity to ramp up profits, basically. So they bolstered all their profits, and they're now realising that demand's dropping. So the easy way around that is to drop prices. You know, probably the most obvious has been Tesla. We've seen $8,000 taken off the Tesla Model Y, which is the top-selling EV in the country. Not quite as much off the Model 3, but still a fair bit off that. And everyone else has either done it before or after. So, you know, most brands, the best one was Lotus, I think, $49,000 off. But you have a look at some of the second-hand EVs at the moment, and particularly the top end of the market has some amazing discounts kicking around. So, yeah, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, they're worried about EV prices and so on. But at the end of the day, if you can't afford a new one, there's some pretty good deals in the used car market at the moment, and a lot of EVs have struggled in terms of residual values. There's one exception to that, which is Tesla. Tesla holds up pretty well on the used car market. Most others struggle a fair bit, which if you go back 20 years when we first had hybrids in the country, and it was a similar deal back then, hybrids had people didn't understand the technology and they didn't quite know what to expect. These days, hybrids have got amazing resale values, so they hold up really strongly and they're in high demand. So plenty going on, and look, it all comes down to supply and demand, competition, and we've seen competition ramping up. We've seen, you know, Toyota's now in the market with an EV, albeit an expensive one. Subaru's come in, Volkswagen's got one coming later this year. Obviously, you've got the pure players, the Teslas and so on, Polestar and so on, punching pretty hard at the moment. But yeah, the competition's kicking in, and we've got more than a dozen new brands coming into the market in the next 12 to 18 months, which is unprecedented for Australia. We've never had that sort of activity in the market. One of the brands I'm sure everyone would have heard of, which is Cadillac, and that's going to be EV only. But most of the brands people wouldn't have heard of. So there are all these new brands coming out of China. Lynk & Co, Zeekr, Xiaopeng. There's, as I said, more than a dozen, or about a dozen coming in the next 12 or 18 months. And the minute you start putting them into the market and the competition, you know, they're all going to want to carve out a slice of the market, and not out of the EV market. They're going to want to take people out of petrol and diesel cars, and that's where the activity has been, and that's what Tesla's been doing, is getting people out of petrol and diesel cars into electric cars. Tesla's now a top 10 brand. So it's so yeah, there's heaps of activity going on. It's a pretty exciting part of the market, and as I said, I think it's great watching not only EV prices coming down, but we've also seen petrol and diesel prices of petrol and diesel cars going up. So you see them going up. The difference between the two is there's still a difference in most parts of the market, but it's a lot less than what it was, and you're going to see that, I think, a lot more over the next few years. And you know, the big thing kicking in next year is the effectively CO2 emissions regulations, the new vehicle efficiency standard. And that is already changing what car makers are planning in their model mixes. So they're already talking about ditching some of their thirstier cars, and in some instances they're talking of bringing in cars that they previously hadn't put on their shortlist. So that's going to change the market enormously. That kicks in, still got to pass the final stages of Parliament, but it kicks in next year. So that's going to be a game changer as well. So yeah, the next 2 or 3 years is going to be amazing to watch. And as I said, affordability and what's happening generally in the market, I think is amazing at the moment. Pretty cool.
Thanks, Toby. I'd like to thank our 4 panellists who have spoken on EVs. Now for a variation on a theme, Peter from Bicycle New South Wales to talk about e-bikes and some safety.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, we want to get people transported around efficiently and safely and sustainably, and certainly in that last mile or last few miles, the bicycle is certainly an amazing option there. So I love driving, like many of us around here, but when we're driving short distances, we can jump on a push bike, or in many cases we can also walk, and we seem to be not doing that as much in our cities. in Greater Sydney alone, there's 2 million car trips each and every day that are under 3 kilometres in distance. So we're all getting a bit lazy, I have to be really brutally honest, and we need to look at alternative options, driving our car when we need it, and or our EV when we need it for those longer distances. But when we're going to the shops, when we're taking our kids to school, we can actually walk and bicycle places much more efficiently, better for the environment. It's better for our health and well-being, and it's a great way to socialise and actually get to know your child or your partner or whoever else it might be, your neighbour that you bump into, which we really, really love. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was safe selection of an e-bike, and the key message there is it's very, very similar, of course, to buying a normal push bike. You do need to be very, very careful though, because there are a lot of cheap, unregulated and illegal e-bikes out on the market, and we want to have obviously a safe place for everyone and a reliable e-bike to get you from A to B. So ensuring that you're purchasing an e-bike that is regulated and legal, has the EU standards associated with it, will ensure that we're not going to see any of these e-bikes on the news. We're currently working with the federal government to try and see the importing of some of these really, really cheap, poorly manufactured and poorly regulated e-bikes, not imported into the country, because we certainly see those as a significant safety risk and an even more significant fire risk as well. On the news, these e-bikes that you're seeing causing fires, they're not the good ones. They're not the nice European ones, the nice Bosch ones, the nice good quality ones. They are certainly the cheap ones and the poorly regulated ones. So really doing your research is very, very important, and making sure that's the EU standards with a Australian or New Zealand standard charger as well is the other critical factor you need to be looking at. But try different brands, try different types, shapes, models. You might want a bike to carry things. You might want a semi-e-cargo bike or even a full e-cargo bike. You'd be surprised what you can actually put on a bike. Some of them are rated to carry over 100 kilos, for example. So they can actually, they are replacing cars in our urban environments. But take one for a test ride, borrow one from a friend or a family member, and really get to know what you need so that you can buy the right bike for yourself. Talking about safe charging, we've spoken about safe charging of EVs, but safe charging of e-bikes is even more important. Like I said, it needs to have an Australian standard, Australian-New Zealand standard charging. That's the reason for that is we need the charger to talk to the battery. The battery management system has to sort of integrate. If it's talking the wrong language, you can come by some pretty major problems there. So making sure that your bike has that is absolutely critical. And don't modify it. They're not designed to be modified. They're not designed to be modified in any way because they're manufactured to reach certain specifications and certain requirements. And modifying that out of the design parameters is really, really dangerous, particularly when you're talking about fast chargers and different charging mechanisms attached to them. If the battery is damaged, if it's overheating, if it's swollen, if it's damaged in any way, dropped from certain heights, they need to be checked by a professional. So don't continue to charge a battery that has those damages to them. The other one I get commonly asked is how long does it last for, and how often do I have to charge it, and when's the best time to charge it, and all the rest of it. There's some good points raised around the EVs here, and it's no different for an e-bike. I charge my e-bike in the middle of the day because I don't like giving it back to the grid for 7 cents. So in many cases, it's free for me to charge mine off my rooftop solar. But ultimately, you need to charge it whenever you need to use it, obviously, so you can't just charge it whenever you like. But You don't have to fully charge it. There's a lot of misconceptions around there, and it's sometimes not best to fully charge it, but you don't want to run it flat either. Deep discharges certainly can damage those lithium-ion batteries, and that's a problem. So making sure that you're charging it with the right charger when you need it is the best place to do it. Generally get about 1,000 to 2,000 cycles out of most of the e-bike batteries. And obviously if you look after it, then you're going to get the higher range and perhaps the lower range for some of the cheaper batteries as well. We are starting to find some better recycling and recovery schemes in Australia now as well. I know Giant Australia's got a good recycling facility for e-bike batteries. So we're starting to see that mature a little bit more in Australia and Sydney. So that is only going to expand over the coming years as well when we have a much larger amount of batteries that need recycling. I wanted to touch on safe riding as well, because I know safe riding is really, really important. We need to share our roadways, but we also need to share our shared paths. And I know up this part of the world, there's a lot of conflict use on our cycleways and our shared paths. And I guess that point around the shared paths is something that sends me a bit bananas, actually. The fact is, the shared paths are shared paths, and we need to focus on the first word of shared paths because we need to give way to pedestrians all the time, at every time, and we need to slow down around pedestrians, use our bells and signal, obeying the road rules at all times. As bicycle riders, we cop a little bit of flack on our roads from motor vehicles, but it's no different. It's the same challenge on our shared paths, and as bicycle users we should have that empathy there and understand that pedestrians need to have right of way on our shared paths. Helmets, though, is the other real issue that I see time and time again. They are mandated, they are required, and they do save lives. So wearing helmets is incredibly important, and we need to do it for a reason, and make sure we just wear a helmet at all times. The other one I want to touch on was trip planning as well, and I know safe riding is really, really important for everyone. There's no one source of information out there though, which is really, really challenging. But the way I trip plan when I'm riding my bike is to use a number of multiple sources. The local council, including Northern Beaches, has got some great stuff on their websites. There's Transport for New South Wales platform as well, which is great. And Google's now got a map overlay of bicycle infrastructure as well. So if you use a combination of those three, you'll generally find a pretty good path to get you from anywhere, A to B, on the safest path. But then you have to test that path out because there's often detours, there's roadworks, there's other things happening, and you need to be aware of that. So you're not rushing on your way to somewhere or work and being late. You need to go and check it out on the weekend. Go and do it with a friend or family member. Enjoy it in your own time. Take your time and have a little bit of fun and find your sort of most appropriate fun, safe route. And that's the best way to do the trip planning as well. So a couple of little tips there and I'll finish it up. Thank you.
No worries, thanks Peter. What's council doing in this space? I think Darren touched on it earlier with the jolt charges, the curbside charging. I remember going to a drop-in session when we launched our EV charging policy 4 years ago, and there was myself, one staff member and one resident. So we've come a long way in 4 years. So it's been interesting seeing how the community's actually taken to electric vehicles and more recently e-bikes. One of the challenges for my team is doing the multimodal journey planning. So we've got reasonably good connections to the city and Chatswood now. It's that first and last mile that we need to concentrate on. And also how we manage the emerging technologies. I remember sitting in a room at Manly Town Hall 3 years ago and e-bikes were a dirty word. We've come a really long way with that. Obviously, a lot of the infrastructure that Peter spoke about, council delivers, the shared user paths, on-road cycleways, the safe cycling network. A lot of that new infrastructure is run out of my team, so one of the chief instigators of our program standing up the back. Thanks, Alex. If you want to ask Alex any questions after this, he's around. What we might do is go to the audience for questions.
Thanks. I noticed scooters, electric scooters, didn't get a mention. I just wonder if you could give us some information about those. Thanks.
All electric scooters in New South Wales are banned in public spaces. I have to make that clear, unfortunately. There's a couple of government and local government partnered trials currently being rolled out in New South Wales, but currently as it stands you can only ride legally an e-scooter, electric powered scooter. Standard scooters are okay, but an e-scooter is still not legal to ride in public areas, only private. Basically you can ride it down your driveway but not down anywhere else. We do see them as Bicycle New South Wales as an integral part of the e-mobility mix, I guess you'd say. And I'd certainly like to see a point in the future where we see them legalised. They need to be regulated because we don't want to see the powerful ones out there, and that's certainly taken place in some states so far.
Cheers. I've got a fairly old car and I quite like it. How do I convert that to an electric car?
Yep, come along to AEVA. I'm chairman of the subgroup that look after conversions, and I do conversions on the side. There's really a couple of ways to go. You can do it yourself. I do it myself. You can go to a commercial converter that will do it for you. The trick is that modern cars are harder to convert because they've got airbags, they've got ABS, they've got all those sorts of things. An earlier model car is easier to convert because it's got less of those things. And it's got to be something that you're going to love because you're going to put a lot of energy, effort and money into it. So it's a bit like a hot rod or a restoration, something along those lines. If that's the kind of car that you've got, then there's ways to do it. I mean, AEVA's been doing it since 1975, so 1973. So, yeah, come and talk to us.
I'm interested in councils getting together and working to get the government to introduce free or almost free public transport to actually encourage people to get out of their cars, to make cycling easier and have fewer cars causing fewer problems. Is there any move in that direction?
I won't speak for my colleagues in Transport for New South Wales, but I would say have a look at their future transport platform on their website and also their active transport, which has been mentioned already. When people talk about electric vehicles, we often think that some people think that we're just talking about electric vehicles for the sake of electric vehicles because they're fun and they're new and they're exciting and they're cool. But and some of that is true, but it's part of a broader net zero strategy for New South Wales government. It's a very complex space, as you've probably heard from some of the early panellists, and EVs is just one aspect of that. So the short answer is there is a lot of work going on in that space, especially in the public and the active transport network. So I'd recommend if you can come and see us afterwards, I'll show you the website, but it's the Transport for New South Wales has a good site on that.
What steps is the state government putting in to get more underground rail throughout Sydney?
I'm going to say pass on that one because, again, I'm afraid I don't work for Transport for New South Wales, but I specialise in electric vehicles being cars, I'm afraid. So I haven't got any answer for you on that one, but I'll try and find out if you want to come over a little bit later.
I just want to ask about when you're talking about fleets, are you also talking about bus fleets?
No, we're not actually. We're talking about passenger and light commercial vehicles up to about 4.5 tonnes is what we talk about when we talk about fleets. But again, I know there is a zero emission bus program running at the moment. In fact, in my neighbourhood, I don't live around here, but in my neighbourhood we have zero emission buses, electric buses going around all the time now as part of a trial. And I know that there's depots and things like that are being built or retrofitted to be capable of charging buses as well.
If you could send those buses through Cromer, it'd be great.
No worries, come and see me afterwards.
Just wanted to
Do
say,
the garbage trucks as well.
a lot of my friends in New South Wales, we ride these electric unicycles. Now, we take specific trips to go to places like Canberra and Queensland because they're 100% legal there. We think it's a bit unfair that New South Wales and other states are lagging behind as far as legislation and everything. So why couldn't there be like a national code or something that would regulate the entire of Australia? Because at the moment, if one state government doesn't like it, well then you don't have it. And we think that's a bit unfair, and we think that it should be, if the Prime Minister can ride one, why can't we?
I totally agree, and there's the challenges of federation, and we still see that with a lot of regulation. We've got different, just for e-bikes alone, we've got 8 different standards and descriptions of e-bike in the country, and then there's specifications that change as well. So it's really, really challenging. I'd love to see a nice, consistent, uniform standard for e-bikes, e-mobility devices, e-unicycles. For those that aren't aware, a unicycle is actually classed as a amusement toy, and so they can't actually be ridden in certain areas, and including the road, because they're classed as a toy rather. So there's all of these little tiny pieces of regulation that needs to be updated and moved into the years ahead of us, because they're only going to grow in popularity, and they should, because they're amazing devices. So we'd certainly like to. The new government has committed to an update of the Roads Act, which is fantastic to see. So this is an opportunity to try and grab some of this, some of these updates, and reform some of this legislation in front of us. So we're involved in that quite heavily at the moment, and as well as a lot of other legislation. So hopefully we can maybe address some of that.
Okay, I have a question for Eva, for Michael, and Toby in particular. Seeing as Australia doesn't have a car manufacturing industry anymore, since 2016 I think, do you see a growth industry in taking big old classic cars such as my old Porsche 928, which is a thirsty V8, and turning it into an EV, which is exactly what I'm doing at the moment? Do you see a growth industry there?
Growth industry, no. Unique boutique industry, yes. For conversions, for private conversions, it'll always be a hot rod, a personal journey to do those kinds of vehicles, because they're really not cost effective. You do it because you love it. My wife's here, so I can't go into too much detail on that aspect. But there are some verticals where it is a thing, where it will be a thing. Trucks, small vans, those sorts of things, where you can do a fleet. So the problem with the conversions that I do, they're all unicorns, they're all unique. I've got a 928, I've got my Lotus, we've got a Land Rover, we've got a Fiat, we've got, what else is there? RX-7, we've got, there's a Peugeot, so they're all different, so it's you can never grow scale in that. It'll never grow huge in that space. But when you can do a fleet of vehicles, like a small truck or a light van, those sorts of things, yeah, I think there's something there. And there are a couple of organisations that are looking at that for mining vehicles and for those kinds of similar types of vehicles that you can package up and you can build. So it'll be boutique, and it'll never be huge in Australia.
Yeah, the problem is that it's basically cheaper to get a new car. So unless you've got something you love like that you're prepared to spend on, and there's two ways of thinking with that. Some people think, you can't take a classic car and destroy its character by pulling out its engine. And other people say, I can spend forever trying to keep this thing on the road or turn it into an EV and now drive it constantly and not have to worry about the engine dying and all that sort of stuff. So, but it is an expensive thing. You're talking, well, last time I looked, 40 or 50 grand up, and you can ease it 6 figures for something like that. So it ends up being expensive, and the price of new EVs are coming down. And then people start saying, well, what about when battery prices come down? Yeah, that's true, but that also impacts the price of new cars. So I don't think the relativity is going to change moving forward. But yeah.
Does Northern Beaches Council have any aspirations to look at waste to energy?
That's outside my realm, but I believe that's where we're heading. Probably not within the LGA though.
Interestingly, Holden looked at doing that years ago down in Melbourne. They looked at going with a rubbish tip, I think it was, and turning it into ethanol, getting the stuff out and creating ethanol. But it ended up being too expensive. There were basically cheaper ways to do it. So I would think with any of that stuff, it's going to come down to money, basically, isn't it? What the investment is.
It's actually a great question for the next panel.
No more questions? All right, I'd like to thank Peter, Dan, Darren, Michael and Toby. Thank you, everyone.